in terms of the way the commissioner, Kathy Engelbert, who I've known and I like, the way she has trouble talking about Caitlin Clark, or if she's asked about Caitlin, then she will say, well, Caitlin and Angel. Well, she wasn't asked about Angel, she was asked about Caitlin. This incredible inability to deal with the facts and to state the obvious. It is astounding to me how Kathy Engelbert doesn't come out after the Marina Mabry hit and say, that's unacceptable, the refs got it wrong. Okay, should have been kicked out then, you weren't, but now I'm gonna kick you out, you're suspended for another game or two. That's just unacceptable behavior for someone who's so important to the league or to any player, right? Mm-hmm. They can't do that.
Christine Brennan didn't just speak her mind. She pulled the curtain back on something the WNBA hoped no one would notice. In a moment that sent shockwaves through both sports media and fan communities, the veteran journalist openly questioned why WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert avoids saying Caitlin Clark's name without dragging in others like Angel Reese or the rookie class. It wasn't just awkward, it felt calculated. Brennan called it out for what it was: a refusal to acknowledge the one player responsible for the league's biggest surge in viewership, ticket sales, and national attention. But here's where it gets unsettling. This wasn't a harmless PR misstep. It was a symptom of something deeper: fear, division, and a commissioner who seems terrified to upset the wrong crowd.
For the longest time, this was seen and still is as a majority Black league, and it is 74% Black. And so I think all of us understand that the issues that can come up in that situation. And hey, I'm sitting here talking to you as a white woman, you're a white man, and we will never live 1 minute in the shoes of our fellow Americans who are Black. So I know what I know, and I know what I don't know.
Brennan's comments confirmed what many fans have whispered for months. The WNBA is bullying its biggest star through silence, hesitation, and selective protection. And now, the spotlight is turning back toward the league's highest office. Why is the commissioner afraid to defend Caitlin Clark? What kind of message does that send to fans, players, and sponsors? Brennan said the quiet part out loud, and now the league is scrambling to control the fallout. But it might already be too late.
The leadership of the WNBA, if they can't do that, then it should change. This is the moment, and whatever jealousy, whatever pettiness, whatever obviously racial concern, which is real and understandable, this league with its partner, the NBA, they have to start to deal with this big time right now before this goes away and this opportunity is lost.
Christine Brennan has covered Olympic scandals, NFL controversies, and NCAA corruption. But when she turned her attention to the WNBA, people listened. Because Brennan doesn't waste words. And this time, she went straight to the heart of the matter. On national television, she criticized Commissioner Kathy Engelbert for her bizarre inability to acknowledge Caitlin Clark without immediately name-dropping other players like Angel Reese, or broadly referencing the entire rookie class. The question wasn't complicated. What do you think about Caitlin Clark's impact on the WNBA? But instead of a direct answer, Engelbert deflected, as if saying Clark's name too clearly would cause an uproar. Brennan wasn't having it. She called out the commissioner's evasiveness and asked the question so many fans have been screaming online. Why is the WNBA tiptoeing around Caitlin Clark? Why can't the commissioner recognize the biggest force in women's basketball right now without watering it down? According to Brennan, it's not just bad communication, it's leadership failure. And when that failure is aimed at the league's most popular and marketable star, it starts to look like something worse. It looks intentional, it looks personal. This wasn't just Brennan airing a quick critique. It was a warning shot from someone who knows how media works and how public narratives are shaped. In Brennan's view, the commissioner's refusal to speak plainly is a form of passive aggression. It signals to players and fans that Clark is controversial, divisive, or even problematic, when in reality, she's responsible for the biggest growth spike the league has ever seen. The longer the league avoids giving her the respect she's earned, the more obvious the bias becomes. And Brennan wasn't alone. Her comments sparked a wave of responses across social media and sports talk shows. Some agreed wholeheartedly, thanking her for saying what the commissioner wouldn't. Others tried to spin it, suggesting the league is just trying to be inclusive and balanced. But the spin didn't stick, because everyone watching knows this isn't about inclusion, it's about fear. By opening that door, Christine Brennan forced the WNBA into the uncomfortable spotlight it had been dodging for months. The silence around Caitlin Clark had grown louder with every cheap foul, every snub, every media sidestep. And now, with one bold statement, Brennan gave voice to the frustration of millions of fans who've watched the league treat its breakout star with kid gloves at best and with active avoidance at worst. What Brennan exposed wasn't just a PR problem, it was a leadership crisis. And the more people listened, the more they started to realize this wasn't just a one-off moment. It was a pattern, one that begins at the very top of the WNBA food chain. But this pattern didn't start with Brennan. She just brought it to the surface. And what it revealed was far more disturbing than anyone expected. Because the problem isn't Caitlin Clark. The problem is how the league treats her. Every time WNBA Commissioner Cathy Engelbert is asked about Caitlin Clark, the entire sports world holds its breath, hoping maybe this time she'll just speak plainly. But over and over again, the same awkward deflection plays out like a broken record. Instead of answering directly, Engelbert pivots. Well, Caitlin and Angel, she says, even when Angel Reese wasn't part of the question. Or she broadens it, the rookie class as a whole, as if Clark's name can't be mentioned without wrapping it in bubble wrap. It's become so predictable that fans have started clocking it in real time. Sports analysts pause interviews and laugh in disbelief when Engelbert dances around the most obvious truth in basketball. Caitlin Clark is the main reason the WNBA is on fire right now. Viewership is up, ticket sales are through the roof, merchandise is flying, and yet, the person running the league can't bring herself to say it plainly. Why? Jit or Drass? That's the question Christine Brennan raised, and it echoes louder every day. Because it's not just about press conferences or interviews. It's about tone. It's about body language. It's about the energy that surrounds every interaction the league has with Caitlin Clark. What should be a celebration feels more like quiet resistance. And people are noticing. Engelbert's reluctance isn't just a matter of PR strategy. It looks like fear. Fear of upsetting other players. Fear of alienating factions within the league. Fear of being labeled. And when fear leads your decision-making, leadership goes out the window. You start reacting instead of leading. You start dodging the obvious to protect your image rather than protect your stars. Let's be clear. No one is asking Engelbert to kneel at Caitlin Clark's feet. No one's saying she has to declare her the greatest player of all time. What fans want, what Brennan demanded, is basic fairness, recognition. A commissioner who can acknowledge the impact of a generational talent without needing a permission slip from Twitter or a focus group. And it's not just fans who are frustrated. Even former players and media professionals have started to voice concern. Because if the league can't stand behind a player who is clearly boosting their bottom line, then what does that say about their priorities? It says the WNBA is more concerned with politics than performance. It says they're so focused on appeasing everyone that they're forgetting how to lead anyone. The most uncomfortable part? Engelbert probably knows all of this. She likely sees the numbers, the trends, the market shifts. But she also remembers what happened the last time someone in her position spoke too soon, pushed too hard, or stood against the wave. That memory might be the real reason she keeps deflecting. But the clock is ticking. And every time she sidesteps Caitlin Clark's name, she chips away at her own credibility. Brennan's critique wasn't about one press conference. It was about a pattern of discomfort, deflection, and delay. And fans are running out of patience. To understand why Commissioner Cathy Engelbert avoids openly praising Caitlin Clark, you have to go deeper than media training or political correctness. You have to look at the fear that's taken root inside the league. Because this isn't just about basketball. It's about perception, power, and the kind of backlash that doesn't come from rivals or analysts, but from within the WNBA's own culture. Behind every awkward interview and vague statement is a commissioner trying not to offend the loudest voices in the room. And those voices aren't the fans buying tickets or the kids wearing Clark jerseys. They're the players, influencers, and activists who helped shape the league during its years of struggle, before Caitlin Clark arrived and turned the lights on. These are the people Cathy doesn't want to upset, because once you lose them, you risk losing your job. Woomily, it's a political minefield. The WNBA is proudly activist. It has aligned itself with progressive causes, social justice movements, and identity-driven narratives that have made it unique in professional sports. But with that commitment comes tension. What happens when a new face enters the league who doesn't fit that mold? Who isn't part of the activist circle, but who dominates headlines, draws in sponsors, and becomes the face of the sport almost overnight? You get Caitlin Clark, and now the league doesn't know what to do with her. Because on one hand, she's everything they've ever dreamed of, marketable, exciting, a ratings magnet. But on the other hand, she's not part of the inner circle. She's not seen as one of them. She's an outsider. And in a league that thrives on unity, that kind of individualism is seen as a threat. So instead of embracing her fully, the WNBA keeps her at arm's length. Not because of anything Clark did, but because of what acknowledging her might represent. It could look like the league is favoring one type of player over another. It could spark resentment. And worse, it could trigger a backlash from social media activists who wield real power, not in direct action, but through perception. That's what makes this situation so fragile. The fear doesn't come from fans or sponsors. It comes from the possibility of being branded. If Engelbert praises Caitlin Clark too openly, she risks being accused of favoritism, or worse, of being tone-deaf to racial dynamics within the league. And in today's climate, accusations don't need to be proven to be dangerous. The threat alone is enough to keep people silent. So Kathy stays vague. She lumps Clark in with other rookies. She pivots to broader narratives. She walks the tightrope, hoping to keep everyone calm. But in doing so, she alienates the people who actually drive the league's growth, the fans. And the longer she avoids the obvious, the louder that disconnect becomes. The fear of backlash may be real, but so is the cost of silence. And at some point, that cost could outweigh everything else. When Marina Mabry blindsided Caitlin Clark with a cheap shot on the court, it wasn't just a foul, it was a moment of reckoning. Millions saw the replay. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't incidental. It was aggressive and deliberate. Fans were outraged, commentators were stunned, and the league had an opportunity to show where it stood on player safety. But when everyone looked to the top, waiting for a firm statement from Commissioner Kathy Engelbert, they were met with silence. This wasn't just another missed call or a ref's mistake. This was a league-defining moment. Caitlin Clark is the most watched rookie in WNBA history. She's filling arenas, boosting TV ratings, and introducing the sport to a whole new generation of fans. But when she got hit, targeted in broad daylight, the league's leader had nothing to say. No suspension, no fine, no public condemnation. Just a vague, missed call, and business as usual. And that's when the narrative changed. What started as a basketball incident turned into a glaring symbol of the league's double standard. If the same hit had happened to another player, someone more established within the league's social structure, would the response have been different? Would the commissioner have shown more urgency? Because it wasn't just the hit, it was the precedent it set. If a player can take a cheap shot at the league's most valuable rookie and there's no consequence, what does that say to everyone watching? It tells veterans that Caitlin Clark is fair game. It tells fans that her protection isn't a priority. And it tells the media that the commissioner is afraid to speak when it matters most. The silence wasn't neutral. It was loud. It echoed through the headlines, amplified by angry tweets, reaction videos, and disappointed broadcasters. And in that silence, a new message emerged. Caitlin Clark might be good for business, but she's not safe in this league. Not physically, not politically, and certainly not institutionally. What makes it worse is the inconsistency. The WNBA has suspended players for far less in the past. Technical fouls, on-court taunting, verbal spats, all have resulted in fines or warnings. But a physical hit on a superstar? That's where the league drew the line and backed off. Why? Because accountability in this case might mean calling out someone inside the league's protected inner circle. And Kathy Engelbert doesn't seem willing to cross that line. This isn't just about fairness anymore. It's about leadership. A commissioner's job isn't to please everyone. It's to protect the game and the people who make it thrive. Caitlin Clark took a hit that should have led to action. Instead, it led to silence. And that silence has become louder than any official statement could ever be. Because fans are listening, and they're not hearing leadership. They're hearing fear, and fear has no place in the commissioner's chair. To understand why Commissioner Kathy Engelbert leads with hesitation instead of strength, you have to rewind to one of the most controversial chapters in WNBA history, the ousting of former Atlanta Dream co-owner Senator Kelly Loeffler. It wasn't just a business shift, it was a power struggle, and it revealed exactly how much influence the players and their political voice wield inside the league. In 2020, during the height of the Black Lives Matter movement, Loeffler sent a letter to the WNBA urging the league to steer clear of political slogans on warm-up jerseys. She suggested using the American flag as a unifying symbol instead of phrases like "say her name" or "Black Lives Matter." Her argument? Sports should bring people together, not divide them along political lines. That didn't sit well with many players. Social justice was becoming deeply intertwined with the league's identity. WNBA stars like Natasha Cloud and Maya Moore were already leading national conversations, and Loeffler's stance was seen as a direct attack on that momentum. The backlash was immediate. Players called for her removal. Jerseys were worn in protest. Hashtags trended overnight. But the most powerful move came from Marina Mabry. Instead of just tweeting, Montgomery stepped away from her playing career to focus on activism. And then she did something no one expected. She partnered with investors and bought the team out from under Loeffler. Just like that, the protest became a power play. A former player had used her voice and her leverage to force out a sitting senator and take ownership of a franchise. It was unprecedented. It was historic. And it sent a message. That message didn't just land on Loeffler's doorstep. It echoed all the way up to Kathy Engelbert's office. The commissioner had watched the entire coup unfold in her first year on the job. And what she learned was clear. Cross the wrong players, and they won't just protest, they'll push you out. Since then, Engelbert has led with caution. She knows that the league's activist wing has real sway. Not just with fans and media, but with ownership and public perception. She saw what happened to Loeffler. She saw how quickly things can shift when players feel unheard or disrespected. And that's why she won't say Caitlin Clark's name without a qualifier. That's why she avoids taking sides, even when the league's biggest star is taking hits and being targeted. Because Engelbert isn't just trying to run a league, she's trying to keep her job. The irony? Renee Montgomery's move was bold leadership. It was decisive. It was exactly the kind of courage fans now want from the commissioner herself. But instead of rising to that level, Kathy has chosen survival. She's chosen neutrality, and neutrality in moments of conflict always sides with the aggressor. The ghost of that 2020 power shift still lingers. It shapes every press conference, every silence, every dodge. And as Caitlin Clark faces rising hostility on the court and in the press, the lesson from the Loeffler era remains painfully clear. In this league, the loudest voice doesn't always come from the commissioner. Caitlin Clark didn't just enter the WNBA, she exploded into it. In a matter of weeks, she became the face of women's basketball. Sold-out arenas, record-breaking TV ratings, merchandise flying off the shelves. Clark wasn't just another rookie, she was a phenomenon. But instead of being embraced by the league she helped elevate, Clark has become a lightning rod. And not because of anything she's said or done, but because of what she represents. Clark threatens the system, not the game of basketball, but the tightly wound social and political ecosystem that has defined the WNBA for years. This is a league that prides itself on unity, activism, and shared identity. For decades, the culture inside the WNBA was built on a collective struggle, a sisterhood forged in resistance. And suddenly, here comes a 22-year-old from Iowa with no ties to the movement, no activist background, and no filter between her and a massive mainstream audience. She's a walking brand, a force bigger than the league, and that's terrifying to the old guard. To some, Clark's arrival feels like an uninvited spotlight. Her fame wasn't earned through years of playing in obscurity or slowly climbing the ranks of a league long ignored. It was instant, explosive, and in many ways, external. She brought millions of new eyes to the WNBA, but they came for her, not necessarily for the league itself. That distinction has created a deep cultural divide. Because now, the league is caught between two identities, the grassroots activism of its past and the commercial stardom of its future. And at the center of that tension is a commissioner who refuses to pick a side. Kathy Engelbert's careful, calculated comments about Clark aren't just about media etiquette, they're about managing internal politics. praising Clark too openly might alienate veteran players who've waited years for this kind of attention and feel overlooked. Not praising her at all, however, sends a message to fans that the league doesn't recognize its own rising star. It's a lose-lose situation, but the league made it worse by pretending the tension doesn't exist. Because the truth is, Caitlin Clark doesn't fit the mold. She's not cut from the same cloth as the league's activist darlings. She's not interested in playing politics. She plays basketball. Her interviews are short, her focus is sharp, and her energy is competitive. She's not here to march. She's here to win. And in a league that's built a brand on social unity, that kind of individuality is both magnetic and threatening. But here's the irony. The WNBA has always said it wants to grow, to reach new audiences, to become a force in mainstream sports. Caitlin Clark gave them that opportunity on a silver platter. And instead of celebrating her, the league has made her walk a political tightrope. Careful not to offend. Careful not to stand out too much. Careful not to change the balance of power. But she already has. And there's no going back. Going back. Christine Brennan's commentary may have focused on the league's treatment of Caitlin Clark, but the implications ran much deeper. This wasn't just about one player. It was a broader indictment of the WNBA's leadership, or lack thereof. Brennan wasn't simply pointing out a communications problem. She was challenging the very foundation of how the league presents itself to the world, and how it treats those who drive its success. Her message struck a nerve because it forced a difficult question into the spotlight. If the commissioner can't stand firmly behind the league's brightest star, what else is she afraid to confront? Brennan's words hit different because she's not a click chaser. She's a seasoned journalist with decades of credibility behind her. So when she questioned why the commissioner couldn't simply give Caitlin Clark credit without deflection, it didn't come off as gossip. It came off as truth. And more importantly, it reflected what millions of fans had been sensing but couldn't quite articulate. The league is uncomfortable with Clark, not because she's done anything wrong, but because she's disrupted the status quo. The bigger issue here is the precedent it sets. If the WNBA can't support a player like Caitlin Clark, who is breaking viewership records and bringing national attention to the sport, then what kind of environment does that create for future stars? Brennan was signaling a red flag. She was saying out loud what others in sports media have whispered in private. The league is not managing its success well. It's reacting, not leading. And in doing so, it risks alienating the very people who could take it to the next level. More than that, Brennan's message exposed a dangerous contradiction. The WNBA promotes itself as inclusive, progressive, and empowering, but only if you fit into the mold. If you challenge the internal politics or rise too quickly without checking all the ideological boxes, the celebration stops short. That's not progress, that's gatekeeping. And Brennan called it out without blinking. Her statement also shifted the media tone. Up to this point, many journalists and commentators had been careful in their language, afraid to upset the balance within the league. But Brennan cracked that shell. She reminded everyone that journalism isn't about maintaining harmony. It's about seeking the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Her critique wasn't just a moment. It was a signal to others in media that it's okay to question the WNBA's direction, to ask why its leadership keeps dodging the most obvious truths, and to hold those at the top accountable. The message wasn't just about Caitlin Clark. It was about leadership, vision, and the future of women's basketball. It was a warning to Commissioner Engelbert. Lead boldly or risk losing the momentum you've been handed. Because if respected voices like Brennan are beginning to question your silence, others won't be far behind. And once the narrative shifts, it's hard to take it back. The WNBA finds itself at a crossroads, and the clock is ticking fast. What began as a silent controversy over the commissioner's refusal to directly acknowledge Caitlin Clark has now escalated into a public relations crisis. Fans are angry. The media is watching. And even longtime supporters of the league are beginning to ask hard questions. Every deflection, every vague answer, every moment of hesitation from Commissioner Cathy Engelbert adds fuel to a growing fire. And at the center of it all stands Caitlin Clark, arguably the most important player the league has ever had, being left out in the cold. It's not just about a lack of praise. It's about the absence of protection, recognition, and leadership. When Clark is fouled hard, the league says nothing. When she's the target of veiled insults or physical aggression on the court, there's no accountability. And when the commissioner is given a golden opportunity to back her publicly, she folds under pressure. That kind of silence doesn't go unnoticed. It breeds distrust. It tells fans that the league isn't being run with fairness or consistency. It's being run with fear. Now the consequences are starting to show. Commentators are shifting their tone. News outlets that once ignored the WNBA are now covering the internal tensions, not for the sport, but for the drama. Social media is filled with debates not about gameplay, but about whether Caitlin Clark is being bullied by her own league. Sponsors and advertisers are paying close attention. And that kind of spotlight can't be ignored. This is where panic starts to set in. Because the WNBA is not just a league, it's a business. And no business can thrive when it's at war with its own success. Caitlin Clark has brought millions of new fans into the fold. Her name alone drives engagement, ticket sales, and jersey purchases. If she walks away, or worse, if she gets injured because of a lack of enforcement, the damage to the league's reputation could be irreversible. And fans won't forget who stood by silently when it all unraveled. Allah also be bonus. There's also the matter of perception. When you appear to be punishing success, it sends a message that rising stars aren't welcome unless they conform. That's a dangerous narrative, especially for a league that claims to be forward-thinking and inclusive. The longer the WNBA tries to straddle both sides, appeasing activist players while hesitating to back its most valuable asset, the more fractured its image becomes. Christine Brennan's call-out was the match that lit the fuse. Now the pressure is on. And the WNBA has a choice to make. Will it double down on silence and continue walking the tightrope, or will it finally acknowledge the storm it helped create? Because this isn't just about one player anymore. It's about credibility. It's about leadership. And it's about whether the league can survive its own indecision. Time is running out. And everyone's watching. Christine Brennan didn't just criticize the WNBA, she exposed its deepest flaw. In a league desperate for growth and mainstream relevance, the refusal to fully support its biggest star, Caitlin Clark, is more than a misstep. It's self-sabotage. Commissioner Cathy Englebert's silence, hesitation, and constant deflections have turned what should be a golden era into a credibility crisis. Fans are losing trust. The media is turning up the heat. And the league's leadership looks paralyzed. This isn't just about one rookie. It's about how the WNBA treats success, dissent, and power. The longer the commissioner avoids confronting the issue, the more the league risks losing its momentum and its future. Because if the message to Clark is, keep quiet and take the hits, then the message to everyone else is even louder. Greatness isn't welcome unless it plays by someone else's rules. And that's a legacy no commissioner should want.